It's Mother's Day, and I'm not going to do a Mother's Day sermon today, but I am going to tell you my favorite Mother's Day story. It was about a young man who stopped into the grocery store on his way home. He just had to pick up some milk and some bread, a couple things real quick, and he grabbed those items and he got in line at the checkout, and there was an elderly woman in front of him who kept turning around and staring at him, and to the point where it was a little uncomfortable. And after she did this 2 or 3 times, she apologized. She turned around and she said, "I'm so sorry, son." She says, "But you just bear an uncanny resemblance to my son. And he passed away a few years ago, and I miss him so much. And especially today, it's Mother's Day, and I see you, and it just reminds me of my son." So the young man was very kind to her, and he said, That's no problem at all, ma'am. I understand." She said, "Would you do me a favor?" She says, "It's going to seem odd, but when I leave, there was something. I used to always wave goodbye to my son, and he'd always wave to me and say, 'Goodbye, Mom,' and I just miss that so much. When I leave the store, would you mind if I just do that? I'll turn to you and say, 'Goodbye, son,' and would you just wave and say, 'Goodbye, Mom?' And it'd mean a lot to me." And he said, "That's easy. I'd be happy to do that for you, ma'am." So she checked out all of her groceries, quite a large amount, and they put all the bags in the cart, and she left. And as she got to the door, sure enough, she turned around and she said, "Goodbye, son." And he looked at her and waved and said, "Goodbye, Mom." And she smiled and walked out, and he felt good. He felt like he'd done a good deed. And then the cashier rang up his milk and his bread and said, "That'll be $179. He said, "I just got 2 items here." She said, "Oh, yeah, but your mom said you were going to pay for her groceries as well." It's not a good Mother's Day story, but it's my favorite one, so that's all. But that's not what we're talking about today. We are continuing our series on the 7 deadly sins. We've already talked about sloth, which is laziness. We talked about anger. We talked about lust, and we talked about pride. And today we get to the sin of envy. A social psychologist named Morrie Silver says, "I can't imagine anyone who hasn't experienced envy at one time or another. To be human is to compare ourselves to others." And that is what he says is the origin of envy. When you start to compare yourself to other people, you compare your salaries to somebody else's salaries, and your house to their house, and your family to their family, your importance to their importance. And in the comparison, then you start to feel deprived. For example, I worked with Youth for Christ for years, and the salary with Youth for Christ was just minimal, barely enough to exist on. But it worked. I was able to pay the bills and to raise a family and to do that on a Youth for Christ salary, but just barely getting by. And I would hear about friends of mine who graduated at the same time I did. In fact, some of them were supporting me with Youth for Christ. I would send them letters every month. They would send me checks, and they supported me. And every once in a while, I'd hear about them getting an advancement in their company or getting a raise, and sometimes I'd even hear the kind of salaries that they were making. And I was okay with my salary because it was paying my bills until I found out what their salary was, and I thought, wow, wouldn't that be great to be getting that kind of salary? And this kind of envy started up as I kind of compared myself. But what was strange to me, I never saw this coming, was that in conversations with them, when I would write these letters about having the opportunity to lead a young man to Jesus Christ or to disciple a group of young high school students, and the fulfillment that came with that and the joy that came with this, I had several of these gentlemen who were making great amounts of money in these high important jobs who said to me, "I would love to trade places with you. I'd give anything to trade places with you." And I would say, "Do you know what I make? Do you know what my salary is?" But they would say, "I would love to have the fulfillment and the joy and the purpose in my work that you have in yours." And I realized that while I was envying their salary, they were envying my work, my job, and my fulfillment. It's a very human thing to do, to compare ourselves to others, and then within the comparison to feel deprived and to feel envious. Let me just make a distinction, because people get envy and jealousy mixed up all the time. And I was trying to figure out how do you distinguish between the two. Envy is when you want something that someone else has. Jealousy is when you're worried that someone's trying to take away something that you have. So, for example, if my neighbor buys a brand new convertible and I want that car, then I'm envying that because I want something he has. I envy him that he has this car. But then if my good-looking, handsome, rugged neighbor decides to take my wife for a ride in his convertible, then it becomes jealousy because I think maybe he's trying to take something that I have. Jealousy usually involves three parties. Envy can just involve two parties. We live in a society that is obsessed with comparisons. Have you heard of a term? It's one of these acronyms, I guess, called FOMO. F-O-M-O. Anybody heard of this? It stands for the fear of missing out. FOMO. Maybe some of you suffer from FOMO and don't even know it. It is an age-old problem, but it has been accelerated in the last few years because of things like Facebook and all of these social media where people can share all of their experiences, and now people can look at them on their smartphones and on their tablets and their computers, and they can see what everybody else is doing. And so it probably happens to you if you look at Facebook and some of these, your friends post pictures of these great vacations that they're taking, these exotic, wonderful vacations. And you're working your tail off, and you're okay with that because work is good and you're happy to have a job and you're working along until you see that picture. And they're sitting on the beach or they're sitting up in the mountains and they're just relaxing and enjoying that, and then you think, I'm really missing out on something. Or even worse, you see all of your friends at this big party and they're having a great time and you're thinking, why wasn't I invited to that party? They're having fun and I'm not there. I'm missing out on this. And so the social media has ramped up what we have always done. We've always compared ourselves. But now you can compare yourselves to your friends many times a day. And so you'll have your friends be posting all these delicious meals that they're eating at these wonderful restaurants. And you're looking at your peanut butter and jelly sandwich and it doesn't taste as good as it did before you saw that picture. Because now you're comparing yourself. All of this comparison leads to envy. We're taught to compare ourselves from the time that we are children. A lot of parents, even though it's not good parenting style, a lot of parents will compare you with your siblings. And if you have an older sibling who is very smart, very well behaved, very good student, and then you come along as the goofy one, then you're always going to be, why can't you be like your sister? Why can't you be like your brother? If your other sibling is a very good athlete and you're not, you get compared to that person. And no matter what it is, we learn to compare at a very early age. Teachers can do that. Coaches can do this. You have these standardized tests that makes it really easy to compare your intelligence to every other kid in the class and find out where you stand. There's a woman named Betsy Cowan, Cohen perhaps, who wrote a book called The Snow White Syndrome. Snow White is the perfect example of envy. Because you have this beautiful queen, you know the story, and every day she looks at her mirror on the wall and she says, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And for years, the answer is always the same because she's so beautiful. The answer is that you are. You're the fairest of them all. And she just loves that. She feels great about herself. Life is great until one day the mirror gives her a different answer and tells her that there's another one in the land who is more fair than she. And all of a sudden, she becomes obsessed with this one other person who is more beautiful than she is, obsessed until she wants to destroy her. So that old fairy tale is a classic example of what envy is all about. And that's the one that Betsy Cowan chose to use as her title for her book on envy, called The Snow White Syndrome. She said that we encourage everyone to look better, to do better, to learn more, and to have more. Our society creates inevitable comparison and inevitable dissatisfaction. She says advertising is one of the primary catalysts for envy. Think about this. She gave a statistic that I was stunned at this statistic. She said every day in the United States alone, the advertising industry spends $6 billion every day on advertising. Can you believe that? $6 billion is spent on advertising just in the United States alone every single day. And the whole idea of advertising is to show you what you don't have, to show you what you need to have a better life. And so you compare what you have, your clunky old car, with this brand new shiny one, and suddenly that clunky old car that you were real happy with yesterday, now you're not so happy with it because you compare it to what this brand new one is. And that's the heart of advertising. And advertising causes us to live in this perpetual state of longing, always wanting something bigger and better, and then envy that comes along with that. So I have a few questions for you. These are going to be questions to help you evaluate your heart to see if maybe envy has crept into your life, into your attitudes. Question number 1. Are you upset when acquaintances advance professionally or socially? This could be, something you see on Facebook, that they got a raise, they got a new job, and they got a new title or whatever it is, and perhaps people who are your peers, or they get ahead. Is your reaction to rejoice with them, or do you get upset? Question number 2, do you feel pain because of another person's success? Another question, do you belittle the accomplishments or the talents or the appearance of other people? Do you tend to criticize and put them down? A lot of times we do that to make ourselves feel better. We try to put others down to make ourselves feel a little bit better. The fourth one and the last one is, are you secretly pleased when a friend or a loved one suffers a setback? On the surface, when somebody tells you that they lost their job, your face says, I'm so sorry, and your words say you're so sorry, but is there something inside of you that senses a little bit of pleasure in that for some reason? This is what happens to people who suffer from envy. They feel this little pleasure inside there. It's actually a very ugly quality, this envy. It's very embarrassing. It's an embarrassing sin. And it seems very petty. It makes people look very small and petty when they have this. And it leads to bitterness. It even leads to kind of a destructive attitude, to wanting to hurt and destroy someone else at times. That's what happened to the Pharisees in the days of Jesus. The Pharisees had great authority and great social standing in their day. People looked at them as the religious leaders of Israel. And when Jesus came along, the crowds began following Jesus. And he would challenge their authority right in public in front of other people. And when they would try to stand up for it, he was always right. And he would always win the debates. And people would watch these debates, and the crowds were leaving the Pharisees and following Jesus. And the Pharisees were getting furious with him. You see a little bit of this in a verse in the Gospel of Mark. He writes that the chief priest and the teachers of the law heard this, and they began looking for a way to kill him. And they feared him because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. So picture Jesus like in the Sermon on the Mount, standing there speaking to this vast group, and in the crowd are some Pharisees. Now, the poor people and the average people in the crowd, they are loving this talk by Jesus because he's speaking the truth to them. He's giving them hope, and he's teaching them about God in a way that nobody had ever taught before. And they are hanging on every word. While they are loving this speech, right next to them are Pharisees. And in their hearts, they are furious because they look around and they see the crowd. They see the adoration for Jesus. and they look at how all these people are going to Jesus, and in their hearts, what they're thinking is, we've got to get rid of this guy. We have to kill this man because everybody's following after him. That is the heart of envy. And that's what envy can lead to. Envy can lead to murderous thoughts. Let me give you a positive example from Scripture. That's a very negative example of envy. Let me give you an example of a man who did not envy, who could have. But because his heart was right with God, he didn't. And that man is John the Baptist. And in the Gospel of John, we read this story of this time when his disciples, the disciples of John the Baptist, were confused themselves because they said the crowds are all going after Jesus. Do you know that before Jesus came and was baptized by John the Baptist and started his public ministry, John the Baptist was out in the wilderness preaching. And huge crowds came out to hear him preach. But after Jesus started preaching, the crowds that came to hear John the Baptist began to dwindle, and the crowds that came to Jesus got bigger and bigger and bigger. So you can imagine how John the Baptist could have felt just like the Pharisees. He could have felt jealous of this man who's drawing bigger crowds. But look what we read in John 3, starting in verse 22. At this time, Jesus and his disciples went out into the Judean countryside, where he spent some time with them and baptized. Now John was also baptizing at Aenon near Salem, because there was plenty of water and people were coming and being baptized. This was before John was put in prison. An argument developed between some of John's disciples and a certain Jew over the matter of ceremonial washing. They came to John and said to him, "Rabbi, that man who was with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one you testified about, look, he is baptizing and everyone is going to him." To this, John replied, "A person can receive only what is given them from heaven. You yourselves can testify that I said, I am not the Messiah, but I am sent ahead of him. The bride belongs to the bridegroom. The friend who attends the bridegroom and waits and listens for him and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine and is now complete. He must become greater. I must become less." That's the right attitude. The translation you're used to says, "He must increase and I must decrease." You see, John resisted the temptation to envy himself. He didn't compare his success to the success of Jesus because he said he was never meant to be the Messiah. He knew he was not the Savior. He said you can only receive what God gives you, what comes from heaven. And so he never expected to receive all of this attention and all of this praise. He knew that that was all meant for the Messiah, and he was not the Messiah. And so he didn't compare, he didn't get envious, and he was willing to decrease in his importance as long as Jesus would increase in his importance. It's the way to not fall into the trap of envy. There's an author who wrote about the 7 deadly sins and said, of all the 7 deadly sins, only envy is no fun at all. Think about this for a minute. You know, anger, we said, might be the most fun of all the sins because you can rehearse all of the things you're going to say and get back at them, and you can enjoy plotting your revenge, and it can really be a lot of fun. And then you can, of course, see how laziness can be fun. How great is that just to stay in bed and roll over and not get out of bed? And we can see how pride is fun because we puff ourselves up, and lust, of course, and all these others. But he says envy is the only sin that's no fun at all. There's nothing fun about this. In fact, psychologists now who study that, they say envy decreases life satisfaction. So if we're all on a scale of our life satisfaction, with those who are really satisfied with their life are up at a 10, and those who are not are down at a 1. When envy comes to your life satisfaction goes down. You become dissatisfied with your life. Envy leads to depression. and the hostility that envy will breed inside of you can actually make you sick, physically ill. Envy makes you look ungenerous. It makes you look mean. It makes you look small-hearted. It's one sin that nobody wants to own up to. Nobody wants to admit to being envious, because it's a terribly unhappy sin, and it's embarrassing to have these qualities. It also can be incredibly destructive. Just like the Pharisees who wanted to kill Jesus, just like in the fairy tale, the beautiful queen wants to kill the beautiful Snow White. Is it Snow White? I think it's Snow White. What? Oh, who cares? There was a case in 1984 out in California that made national news. In fact, they ended up making a movie out of this, a made-for-TV movie, of course, where it had to do with cheerleading. In this particular school out in California, some of you will remember this story, the student body elected the cheerleaders. It sounds fair and democratic, but it's a horrible idea, because it becomes a popularity contest to become a cheerleader. And so the girls would all kind of be campaigning for all of their friends to vote for them, and it became the most important thing in the world to many of the girls in the school to get elected to the cheerleading squad. It was the most important thing. It was a life and death thing. If you made it, everything was wonderful, and if you didn't make it, life was terrible. And there was one girl who lost out for the final position on the cheerleading squad. She lost out by just a few votes, and the girl that she lost out to was her arch rival, the one that they despised each other. And it just devastated her that she lost out to them. And she was so filled with envy, and that envy just kept rising in her, and she would see that other girl out there on the cheerleading squad, and it just got so bad, and it turned into bitterness, and it turned into rage, and it got to the point where she actually murdered the other girl. She killed her. Now, at first they didn't know that she was the one who killed her. And because she was the next one in line, she actually took that girl's spot on the cheerleading squad until the police did all of their research and discovered she was the one who committed the murder. So they made a made-for-TV movie called Death of a Cheerleader about this. And the whole thing is about envy, how it starts, how it develops, and what it leads to. We know in the Bible that Cain killed his brother Abel, because he compared himself to his brother, and his brother's sacrifice was accepted, his wasn't, and his envy got to the point of murder. We see Saul, who killed David, because even though Saul was a great warrior, when David came along, David was a better warrior. And the women would sing this song that drove Saul crazy. It would say, Saul has killed his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. Talk about a comparison. They're saying David is a better warrior than Saul. And Saul, the king of all Israel, tried many, many times to kill David because out of envy and out of jealousy. Envy is not only can it lead you to a point of wanting to destroy others, it can be very self-destructive. There's an old a story in Jewish folklore about a store owner who was visited by an angel one night, and the angel said to him that he was going to grant him a wish. He could ask for anything in the world, and he would give it to him. But he said, there is one catch. He said, whatever you ask for is going to be given double to your rival who owns the store across the street. Oh, the store owner hated that guy over there. Boy, they competed with each other, and they hated each other to the death. And the angel said, whatever you ask for, I'm going to give to you, but I'm going to give your rival double. So if he asked for $1 million, his rival's going to get $2 million. And he kept thinking of everything he could ask for, and it was making him crazy. So you know what his wish was in the end? He said, I want you to strike me blind in one eye. That was his wish. He could have anything he wanted, but that's what envy does. It's not only destroying another person, but it's self-destructive as well. Envy leads to discontent. One of the great values in all of Scripture is contentment. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Paul says, I've learned to be content whether I have much or whether I have little, and we strive to be content, but envy will always take us in the opposite direction toward discontent. as we compare ourselves with somebody else. So let me give you some good news on top of all of this. It's a heavy subject, and we're all in danger of it. But I want to give you some good news. There is an antidote to envy, and it's something every one of you can do it, and you can do it today. The antidote for envy is thankfulness. It's that simple. If you thank God for what you do have, and you focus on thanking God for what He has given to you, you stop thinking about the things you don't have. That's what, see, advertising gets you to focus on what you don't have. Thanksgiving gives you to focus on what you do have, and you begin to thank God for what you have. We know as Americans that even if you are poor by our society's standards, you are wealthy compared to the rest of the world. Even if you live in the smallest house over here, as you saw from the slides today, it's a mansion in most other places. The food that you eat might seem pretty mundane for our society, but it is a feast compared to what other people are eating. So let's start giving thanks for what we do have and focus on that, and then the comparison on the other side begins to drop off. If you give thanks for the tangible things, like your food and your clothes and your shelter, even the people, the loved ones in your life, and then for the intangibles, give thanks for the salvation that God has given to you. Oh my goodness. Give thanks for the forgiveness of your sin. Give thanks for the peace that Christ gives you that you can have no matter what circumstance you're in. The joy that He gives you, His own joy He gives to you as a follower of Him. When you start to give thanks for those are things money can't buy. And the richest people in the world, if they knew of your peace and your joy, they would be envious of you. Maybe they are right now. But don't think about that. Just give thanks for the intangibles and the tangibles. When you thank God for these things, you might want to thank Him for protecting you against the things that you foolishly desire. I've heard so many people who said they were praying to win the lottery. And as soon as they tell me they're praying to win the lottery, I pray that they don't. Not because I'm mean, I'm a horrible person. No, because it's the worst thing that can happen to people. Have you read stories of what happens to people who win the lottery? It's horrible. Their lives are often ruined and destroyed when they win that. And so we have this foolish desire to get rich. And the Bible tells us riches is one of the most difficult things you can have. It'll distract you from God. There are people who are followers of Christ who became rich, and they became so focused on caring for all of their possessions and managing all of their possessions that they have no longer had time for God in their lives. And their spiritual life completely fell apart because of the riches. That's why Jesus says it's so hard for a rich man to get to heaven. So thank God. If you're not rich today, thank God that you're not rich. That's a counterintuitive thing, isn't it? Thank God that you're not rich today, because it's hard for a rich man to get into heaven. It's hard to keep your eyes fixed on Christ when you're surrounded by all these material things. We tend to envy beautiful people. But to be honest with you, some of the most beautiful people that I've ever met were very egotistical. Maybe you need to thank God you're not beautiful. And just thank you for making me just like a plain old person, so I'm not going to be too proud of my looks here. How about we tend to envy people who are great athletes. Boy, when I was in school and I was wrestling and doing these things, there were a whole bunch of wrestlers that I envied. I wanted their strength and their speed and all of those things. I'm thankful that I wasn't, because that wasn't the life that God had for me. And with all of that success would have come all kinds of pride, and who knows where my life would have gone. So now I thank God that I'm a pretty mediocre athlete. I'm not as strong as a lot of other people, and I'm not as good looking. I'm not as rich as they are. And even academically, all of you, when you were going to school and you had those standardized tests, and you'd hear those people who, my brother talks about a friend of his, he came out of the SAT test where they had to answer like 300 questions, and his friend comes out and he says, I think I missed one. And he was serious too. He knew which one it was. He knew he had all the others right, but there was one that he thought he might have missed. He was that smart. Well, when we know people who always get the A's, who everything comes easy, we envy those people. But that leads to self-sufficiency. And a lot of these people with their intellectual arrogance never turn toward Christ because they think they can figure it out for themselves. So maybe you can thank God that you're not that smart. It's hard to figure, isn't it? Thanks that I'm not rich or smart or good looking or athletic. Counterintuitive all the way around. But I really believe it's true. I really believe that's where we should give our thanks. Because those are things those are things we all envy, but they're not necessarily good for us. I'm so thankful that I have Jesus. And Jesus is enough. And if Jesus is enough for you, be thankful. Be thankful for that. Let's pray together. Our Lord God, we praise you for the salvation we have. We praise you for the forgiveness, for your grace and your mercy. You poured that out upon us. We don't deserve it, Lord, but you've given it to us. In our relationship with Jesus, I have more than money can buy. I have things that money can never buy. And I am so thankful for those things, Lord. And Lord, I pray that this week that you will just help all of us to overflow with thanksgiving for the intangible things that you poured out upon us. And Lord, help us to so keep our eyes fixed on Christ that we don't look at the material things. We don't focus on the things we don't have because we're too busy thanking you for the things we do have. We thank you, Lord. We love you and we praise you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Would you